Hey folks, what's up? It's Antonio Pomares, and welcome once again to the Hungry Bleak Show. Now, last time I was alerted by hearing the recording that when I do my usual rubbing my hands together, because it's just a thing, whatever, that it is incredibly loud. So I'm never going to do that again. It sounded like my hands were going to catch fire, like they were flints. Hands are not that dry. My hands are moisturized. I promise you, my hands are moist. If you know me, you know I use moisturization all the time. I can't. I'm not going to explain. So I'm a grown ass man. I'm not going to explain myself and how my fascination with lotion and not being dry is, whatever. Look, folks, we've got a great show. Excuse me, coming up, and I'm just incredibly elated by the stream of people that have hit me up and who have asked to be on, and the quality work that is coming out in these comic streets, but the quality creators that have been on these screens with me that I've been able to share time with. I'm absolutely elated by it, and I thank you so very much. And this is another banger coming up. So every so often I'll go on Webtoons. Not very often because I forget it's there. It's not a slight to Webtoons. I just forget that it's there because there's so many other places for me to get comics. You know what I mean? Aside from my print pile, which is taller than me, as well as my digital pile. But one of the comics on there really had me in kind of a chokehold. I'm like, damn, this is really, really good. Fast forward again, I'd forgotten about Webtoons. Went back on there to go look for the comic, and it would not come up. Damn. I pulled it. Something's wrong with my Webtoons, my account, whatever it is. I don't know. Person decided, look, I'm going to take it off. They're going to do their own thing. And now they have a Kickstarter coming out, and they've actually partnered up with a company that I've talked about, a publisher I've talked about, Wiseacre. If you remember, I reviewed Magnus, which I absolutely loved. It was really cool, great, awesome. So to see their work coming out from this publisher whose work I dig is awesome. Look, y'all heard me talk enough. Let's hear from the creator himself, Nigel Lynch.
Hi, thank you for having me on, sir.
Hello, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good.
Pretty good. All right. So, like, fan of the work. Diary of Stray Dogs, The Wounded was, yeah, was just awesome. But we're gonna talk about it in a few minutes. But first, I want to know, Nigel, how did you get into the comic book world? How did you like? What was your first introduction, and how did you get into wanting to create comic books?
Okay, so my first introduction was at the age of about 4 years old.
Hmm.
The first comic book I ever got was from my father, and it was a Spider-Man 222. I actually looked it up. I can always remember the cover. It was Spider-Man versus Speed Demon, and I used to read this thing back to front, front to back. I used to read it backwards because at that time I didn't know I was dyslexic, so I just used to be enamored by this book, and that was the
Hmm.
first comic that I ever got. And back then, I've heard you talk about this on your show too, because I'm a child of the '80s. You got your comics from the supermarket, you got your comics from your friends,
Yep.
you got a issue one somewhere, you got a issue two, then the story would jump, and you just read whatever you had.
Hmm.
You was lucky if you got the last of a 5 part series, so you didn't have to worry about your hero being left in peril. Or the most a book would be a part one and part two. So it was pretty good with that. So that was my first introduction. Came forward, was a big fan up to about 11 years old. Um, I'm from the Caribbean, so a lot of my family migrated to the UK, and they had their own set of comic books. So they sent me their books. So that was another comic book sense of influence. You kind of look puzzled. Back in those days, Marvel UK and Marvel US were two
Oh
different
my,
companies. So they
yes,
sell
I
licenses.
remember.
Yeah. So I used to get these big
Yeah.
magazine comics with 3 stories in it, not colored. It would be Spider Man at the front, Thor in the middle, and Iron Man at the end. And
Hmm.
they would just do overruns and give, and then they had their own Transformers story, which was like a totally non canon stuff. So I was always inundated with comic books. You didn't have video games like you had now. You didn't have the internet. So it was a pastime that was people talked about in the playground, talked about what book, comic books, you traded comic books. You One thing I do regret, we didn't have that collector mentality that the US people have. So we didn't bag and box and stuff. You read that stuff till the cover came off, till it became a pack of cards. You
Nope.
pass it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Fast forward again, fell out of the comic book industry, lost interest, came back when it was about 20. And at that time, Civil War was out, Ultimates was out, and I was totally confused. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know anything.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of got into it, but all my life, I always wanted to do my own comic book. Uh, I always wanted to do something like along the lines of like a GI Joe kind of thing. I always liked GI Joe,
Mhm.
and I like the way how it had a team, interesting characters. Snake Eyes was my favorite character at the time, and I just loved GI Joe. And then you had the toys to go along with it. So it was to collect toys. You had the Transformers and stuff. So I got into wanting to do my own comic book. Didn't know how to do it. I wasn't much of a writer in terms of physically writing. I was a storyteller. I could tell stories. We did talk about stuff. I did have that imagination. Being a child of the 80s, you had to imagine everything. And I
Yeah.
started to scribble down notes for a comic, and I went to an artist, and he was like, "Nah, this is not how you got to do a script." And I was like, "What?" So luckily, at that time, you was able to get some information on how to write a script. So I wrote my first script, and as luck would have it, when I finished my first script, I went to a school expo or expo and met an artist. And we kind of just became fast friends from there. And that's how we actually formed Beyond Publishing, the Caribbean publishing group that I'm a part of. Um, and that would have been in 2005. And
Okay.
since then, I've been doing comics for about 17 years. So I've done over 20 books or so.
I mean, for real. Honestly, wow. Um, I totally when you said Speed Demon, I felt that because I believe I had that comic too when I was a kid. Speed Demon, that name definitely sticks in my. I'm gonna have to look that up and see that cover, and I know it's gonna instantly flash in my head. I
Yeah.
was the same way as far as reading a comic. I would read it front and back, and I would look at the art. And like comics are what helped me to learn how to read that, and the little golden books. Those two things are what helped me
Mhm.
to read, or to learn to read, I should say. Um, and yeah, the cover would fall. Nowadays, you think about the cover falling off, you're like, oh my god, like you have a panic attack, you'll lose your mind. Like now, but at that point, you would read it. Like I would maybe find like even on a playground, I would maybe find like a comic that was maybe like just like the maybe 6 pages. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I might like just look at it and because it's a comic, so I'm looking at reading it. I'm not worried about. I'm just
You used to be able to go into a doctor's office. You could go anywhere,
yes,
and there was a comic book there. There was a
yes,
comic book. There was a DC. There was a Marvel, and there was an Archie comic book. There was a comic book. There was
yeah.
always a comic book. Anything that was selling to children, it was done in a comic book form. Brush your teeth, whatever. Comic book. Comic.
Yes, yeah. I remember there was a AIM or a Crest commercial where I think it was like the Marvel character. So it was, I think Spider Man like had his mask up and he was like brushing his teeth or something. But yeah, that's true. Yeah, there we're always in the doctor's office. Yeah, there was that or Archie's or was like Woody Woodpecker, but like something. But they always had those three archetypes were there. Yeah, that's right. Damn, I hadn't even thought about that. I haven't thought about that in so long. It'd be on that little round table in the doctor's office. You'd sit down in your little chair and yeah, you would. Awesome. That's like I always love hearing about how people got into comics and how they got into the field because there was a point when we really didn't know how to get into the field. We didn't know how to get into these types of fields. And the
Mhm.
avenues for us, for black people, for people of color, it was unheard of. Like you didn't know a lot of times because you didn't actually see what people looked like.
Yeah.
The only names you really knew at that point were maybe Stan Lee.
I thought Stanley owned Marvel, and I thought Stanley wrote everything.
Yep.
So as you
Yeah.
said, so when I get into certain conversations with people or interviews, and someone says, "Well, who's your favorite writer?" Or back then when we picked up a book, once it was Spider Man, it was Spider Man. You didn't check to see who wrote it. You didn't check to
Yes.
see who
Yeah.
drew it. The most that would happen is you was a little pissed off if the art didn't quite look the same. to the one that you liked, and then you just kind of got used to it, and you moved on.
Yeah, that's a perfect explanation because it wasn't. You didn't know. You were a kid. You didn't know. You were just happy to be reading this comic with your favorite character in it. Nowadays, we will pay attention more. We will look at more. So it's very important that I ask these questions of how you got into it, because if somebody's like, "Oh, I don't know how to get into it, and maybe I'm not right enough, well enough," I want them to hear stories of us
Mhm.
saying, "Well, this is how I got into it, and I learned this and this, and as I went along the way," so they can go, "Okay, so it is possible." Because I love hearing stories like that, because I didn't know how to do this. I never, when I was a kid, there were no like podcasts or web shows or anything like that. Obviously, there weren't web shows. There was no web at that point. But now to see it, so I always love to hear those
Mhm.
stories, and sometimes it actually takes me back and it brings a bit of joy to it because you remember that you like it and you really love it. What I do love, I got to tell you, is Critical Ops Force and The Wounded #1. I haven't read #2. That's part of the Kickstarter, but you have a Kickstarter, right? That's going to be
Mhm.
starting, when is it?
The 16th,
The
16th of
16th.
this month.
Okay, so that's next Saturday.
Yeah, yeah,
So
next
yeah,
Saturday. Yep.
yeah, next Saturday. And look, I absolutely loved reading the Diary of Stray Dogs, The Wounded. First thing I love is the fact that you have this expanding universe that's not
Mhm.
superhero related.
Mhm.
As much as I love superhero comics, I do have superhero fatigue.
Mhm.
But I read a plethora of comics, and well, one of the things I do love about genre I do love is like that sci-fi paramilitary type of comic. So when you hit me up, you were definitely scratching an itch for me twice with both of these comics, and I'm so glad that I got to read it. Here, folks, here's the page that you can go, and this is the notify me page. So when you go to this page, you hit the green button there, and you'll put your email in, and it'll notify you when the Kickstarter starts immediately, and you can go in and pledge. The Diary of Stray Dogs Volume 1 is a really great. Or, you know what it kind of reminded me of when I was watching it? It did remind me of like kind of an 80s movie, and it kind of reminded me of, in the beginning, kind of reminded me of um The Running Man.
Mm.
Because when Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, I can't remember the name of his character, is in the helicopter,
Right.
and your character's in the helicopter, and I had these twinges. You're hitting. You may not even realize you and your artist team may not even realize your art team may not even realize that you're hitting a note with some of these things and taking it back, and I absolutely loved it. What was the catalyst for uh, the Diary of Stray Dogs?
Okay, so the catalyst was I wanted to do a story involving Caribbean characters set in the future in let's say far enough in the future that I could have some sort of freedom. And because I don't get to see Caribbean black characters set in a futuristic setting. It's either now or it's either past, that kind of stuff. And I wanted to do it. And then I also wanted to do it from a point of view of the way how the Caribbean is. The Caribbean is this place that's just for sea, sun, and fun. We are, this is group of nations that just exists sometimes. We're not lumped in with some of the things. So if you grew up in the 80s, you always felt kind of left behind because you didn't have the technology, you didn't have these different things. So my projection of the future is these things kind of go on, but at a different scale. So the the story is from that point of view, and these group of mercenaries then would have to do jobs involving the first world and the greater nations of the world, and deal with some of those problems and that kind of stuff. So that was a catalyst, and that's how I came up with it. Um, for the wounded now, that story kind of was put on hold. And what I did with the wounded was I took one of the characters from the original concept and said, what would her backstory be? How did she become the person that she is today? So I went back and I wanted to create a story that would flush out her beginnings. But I also, because as an indie creator, one of the things that we kind of face is we produce a book and the next book most likely will come out the next year. So I didn't want that. I produce a book and then someone has to wait another year just to get the end of that story. And then there's a lot of stories that we're waiting for that are 5 years in the making. So I didn't want to do that. So one of the things I kind of took from my 80s kind of past was like when we were growing up and we watched an episode of the A-Team, you watch that, you can miss next week, come back and watch the other one, you can watch Knight Rider. And I said, well, can I do that? Can I do that story with connective tissue, but I can give the audience something that is a full story within how many pages needed. So that was one of my goals. That when I was finished with The Wounded, you as a reader felt, even if you wanted more, you felt content to know I got a story from beginning to end. So that was one of my goals. And that's what I kind of succeeded. And it came with its own kind of pitfalls because when you're working with those kind of constraints, you have to get the audience to fall in love with the characters. You have to be able to tell a cohesive story, and you have to be able to wrap it up. So those were the things that we're faced with, and it was had a lot of fun with it, and I learned a lot from that book.
I learned a lot like reading it. I always try to take away from any story that I read, whether it's that person's different storytelling, their the art team, whatever it is. What you're saying about islands and Barbados and like the islands, yes, they are similar to like let's say Hawaii. A lot of
Mhm.
the world only see them as a place, like you were saying, for sun, fun, beach, and then we leave. And when they would put someone from there in those stories, they would have no agency. They were like they were like background wallpaper or noise. It was just somebody there to have maybe an accent, a horrible accent usually, and just something silly, or it would be like their person on the street. You know, oh, well, I know a guy who's around like Jimmy something, whatever, Jimmy Bones, Jimmy some type of name. So you're definitely right. So that was a definitely uh, wonderful touch to have it there, and also to have the lead of it to be a female character. I love reading comics with lead characters, protagonists, or ensemble characters like leads who identify differently than I do because I want to see everyone win. I want
Mhm.
to see every marginalized person win, and I love the fact that we did get a story from beginning to end, but I was like, oh, now I want to see what's next. But I was satisfied because she had her arc, and it was um filled with bullets. It was filled with some drugs. It was filled with love and passion, and it was also filled with sadness. And there were so many things going on in that story, but they all blended so very well, and I loved it. Um, and this is how I know that a comic hits me. As I'm reading it, I said, "She didn't do the delivery that night." And I had to go back and reread it, and I was like, "Wait, she's holding off on that delivery." He told her specifically she had to do that delivery that night. And I got a little upset and I was like, okay, now they've got me. They've got me hooked in. When I get upset at a character while I'm reading it, I know, okay, okay, cool. Okay. That character is now alive. This story is now alive, and I loved it. Reading Critical Ops Task Force
Mhm.
was just fun. Wall to wall, fun action. You gave me this heart wrenching kind of origin story, and I was like, okay. Then you give me the next story, which is also an origin story in a sense, but also filled with uh, blood, bullets, um, kind of soft double crosses, and he gave me somebody with an axe, actually two axes, which I love when not enough characters have axes. I don't know why. I wish in video games they would give more characters axes. I don't know why they don't, but what. So tell us about Critical Ops Task Force, which I loved, and the art felt it felt so attuned to the story because it felt kind of gritty and necessary. Where this story and the action that was gritty, necessary, bloody, it felt so on par, and I loved it.
Yeah. So I'd like to shout out the two artists for these books. So on the Wounded, uh, I was working with a guy from Spain called Juan Carlos
Mhm.
Francisco, and he is the person who kind of gave the Wounded that world its life. So there's a lot of things that he did there that was just from him. Like when you see them in the street with the clubs and the nightclubs and that atmosphere, that was
Mhm.
straight from him, right? With my direction, but he kind of just ran with it. So the second book, COTF, that was done by a guy called Francesco Mazzola, and he is from Italy. And when I saw his work, what I tend to do is if I see an artist and I like an artist's style, I write a story to suit their style. So I
Oh,
wouldn't write
yes.
the same story for two artists because I try to look at what their strengths are. And what I tend to do also, we talk. So if I meet you as an artist, I would say, well, I got a book, and then I'll tell you about the book. But then um, we talk about things like what movies do you like, what that kind of stuff. We get to know each other, and once we
Right.
do that, you start to realize that you're on the same page, or if you know that this person likes this. So when we was doing that, we was like, this book is like the raid extraction. It's that
Yes.
balls to the walls kind of thing, right? And we were just like, there was parts in there
Yes.
where I wrote a page, and I'm the kind of writer that will be, we need from this page, we gotta go from point A to point B. Once you
Mhm.
get from point A to point B, and he then came back and said, look, can we have the characters zip line across from one building to the next? I said, can we get from point A to point B? If you could do it, do it. Because you get the best out of an artist when they're in the driver's seat because you're working with their imagination. You're not stifling them. So the two books, because the goal of the two books are Diary Stray Dogs is about mercenaries. The whole universe is about mercenaries. That's why the name Stray Dogs, because mercenaries are called dogs of war, and these are stray dogs, so they have no masters, almost like Samurai Ronin.
Right.
So what it is that these two characters, Shani and Douglas, are two sides of a different the same coin. So
Mhm.
that's why you get like they're set in the same world, 10 years apart, but I try to make them different. So that's why the two books don't have the exact same feel, and I have like certain freedoms. I had a lot of fun with COTF. That character with the two axes, I really wanted to let go with him a little bit more. But yeah, because you need to kind of create these interesting characters that are unique. You realize you don't have unique characters when you can swap dialogue between them and it doesn't make a difference. So those are some of the things that I was trying to look out for. Um, what makes this character should only say this? This character should be vulgar. This character is an idiot. That kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with COTF. The and I look forward to actually writing the second one for that one. And
Oh.
uh, I think what you would notice that both of the books kind of dark. They still kind of have that darkness
Mhm.
over them, and a little bit, I guess, is the way how I kind of see the world.
Yeah, they both had a darkness, but almost like kind of a different kind of darkness, if that makes any sense. Like one had more of a sadness, darkness, but almost a bit of hope because it was a beginning,
Yeah,
and it was like, well, that's done. If that's the worst that can happen to me, then everything else in front of me can be better. COTF was like it was almost like having like Douglas. I had like that. I almost felt like he had a drunken binge, and everything was there. And then he woke up and he was like, and then he had this realization, and that was the darkness for him. And it didn't feel like he had like almost like a bright light in front of him because the bright light that he had in him because he had two partners in bed with him was like this manufactured um light. at the end of the tunnel, which wasn't real. You know, it wasn't like that real one, that genuine. I guess I should that genuine one. That was how I felt when I saw him in the bed, and then he waking up and he's like, you know, can you? But there's almost like a little glimmer because possibly somebody might still be in the world, what have you. But it just felt like it was. I feel like there's a cloud over him always for some reason. Even though it's my first
Yeah,
time meeting him, I feel like there's a cloud over him always. Where
yeah, and
yeah,
that's what I was going for. And the other character in there is almost like we'll see who affects who.
mm,
Will will Douglas rub off on this character, or will this character soften him? The other thing, so that's where it is. You got what? So we don't know where it's gonna go there. Um, but that's the point. That's the I try to do that because it makes the characters more human because he's flawed. Everybody's flawed.
yeah, that is something that I loved about it too. Is the fact that I think there's a line even in I can't remember which one, but it's like there's a line where it's like there are no heroes, and in this world there are no heroes. They're just like varying shades of gray. There's no white horses. There's no black hats. There's no. It's just varying shades of gray.
Yeah, as
And
in
he
CFTF.
yeah, and Douglas definitely shows gray at the end when he goes okay, and he just does the job. And I was sitting there like, oh, so again, that's very interesting to me. Like I like characters that are gray because they're very complex, just like all of us. Like humanity is very. There are no white hats. There are people who can do what they can, hopefully for a better, but there's still gray there, and there are people who just go full out. But there's no one's any particular way, and that's how I felt like this was really the crux of CLTF, which again I love because you can have that fun, but you know at the end there's that grayness of now what. But I'm excited to read more of it because I absolutely loved it. It was a bang on book. Like I said, both of them. And I didn't realize this until I really looked at the Kickstarter page that there was going to be two. It's going to be COTF
Yeah,
and The Wounded 2. I didn't realize that, which I'm happy about.
yeah, yeah. So you will get to see the Wounded Two. The Wounded Two is. I always believe that when you go forward, you produce your better work.
Hmm.
Um, the Wounded Two is probably the best I've done so far.
Hmm.
It's about 70 pages, so it's a
Okay.
meaty story. You
Yes.
go back with Shani. This time, Shani has her own mercenary group. Remember at the end of book one, she
Yes.
said she was going to build an empire. She's going to build her own group.
Yes.
So she
Yes.
builds her own group in book two, and we kind of see what she's been up to in the time since book one, how she's dealing with some of the stuff that happened from book one, um, her religion, has she taken up with God, that kind of stuff. So it's a trying like a I tried to do it where I looked at what happened in book one, and years ago, or even sometimes with Marvel and DC, you read a book and something traumatic happened in this run, and then the next run is like, oh yeah, I didn't remember I had a dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I always want to pay attention to every point that was important that should affect this character going forward, and have it
Hmm.
affect them in the next book.
That yeah, that's you paying attention to that because that's how a story should flow, and that continuity is important because these are things that are happening in this traumatic war. Like this isn't something where it just cancels out and the next issue everything's fine. Everything matters. Like there's ripple, and for it to be an entire universe that you're doing, they'll affect different people in different ways in years to come. Maybe the next day, what have you? Maybe in a different part of the city or a different part of the world. So I love that fact. Folks, look, it's a no-brainer. I go to Kickstarter, Critical Ops Task Force. Go check it out. Definitely look, pledge. They're going to be some of the best reads you'll have, and I want you to sit down and definitely read Critical Ops. If you love like you're saying, you hit two movies exactly: The Raid, Redemption, and Extraction. If you love those two movies, Critical Ops Task Force is going to be all for you. Uh, the The Dire Stray Dogs, The Wounded, I want to say more reminds me of Atomic Blonde. That kind of feel where you're still getting this hard hitting story action. You're getting, all that, but you're also getting an actual story that will resonate. You're getting some heft, some drama there, and some love, but also some pain. Definitely go and pledge. I don't know how to say it. These are phenomenal. And as always, if I'm talking about a book, I'm liking it. I'm telling you to get it. I know how hard it is to get your money. I know it's hard to get my money. It is. So when I tell you to go and pledge for something that is definitely going to hit, this is one of those books that's definitely it does hit. I read it. I got to read it. Definitely hitting. You know. But something I do want to ask you, um, with being a creator, and just being human on this planet,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that what's something that you do that's a self-care thing for yourself that's very important, that keeps you grounded, that keeps you just here and in the moment at times?
a, a lot of things. Sometimes you said you don't realize how the world affects you until you're in a slump. So
Hmm.
it helps sometimes to surround yourself with good friends and people who care.
Yes.
Up to a year ago, around December, I was literally walking away from the comic book industry. I was done. I was like, I had my book deals. I've done stuff. I've won awards. I could deal with it. I could just walk away. Nothing is working out. And a friend of mine came and he spoke to me, Matthew Clark, and he just told me, nah, I need you to keep at this. Don't give up. And I thought about the team that I was working with, and I was like, it wouldn't be fair to them. But along the way, to help deal with some of that stuff, you got to lean on your family. Sometimes I would do walks. I would go for a walk. I would walk home from work because
Hmm.
exercise is very important. Because if you don't keep yourself healthy, it kind of affects you mentally.
Yeah.
You get depressed. It's harder to get out. We all deal with depression, but it's harder to get out of certain funks if you're not healthy or if you have unhealthy habits. I spend a lot of time with my family. We just chill. We just kind of put on Netflix, but at the same time, because I think it's a little bit of our environment that kind of gives us this kind of almost ADHD. So you're watching Netflix, you're reading, and you're on the phone at the same time, and then you're still sharing the space with two
Hmm.
other individuals. But the mere fact is that we're there together and we're joking, we're laughing, we're just watching nonsense TV. Um, and then a lot of it too, on the flip, is I deal with my day to day job stress by creating. So that's what gets me
Okay.
through that. So sometimes I remember if I go to my brother's house, I may carry my laptop and he would say, I can't believe you're working. And I'll be like, but this isn't work. This is fun for me.
Okay.
I got an idea. I want to put this idea out on paper or I want to contact this body. So one of the things, if you are a creator, that kind of gets you through this too is when you get that comic book page, either be it artwork from lines or if you get the colors, that is a high. That could be addictive. If an artist has you on a schedule that he gives you, I remember my artist used to draw 3 pages every Friday, and that was all I looked forward to. Seeing those 3 pages on Friday, seeing my words turn to pictures with, what I mean? There's nothing like it. Then send it to somebody else because it kind of shows you that these three, because comic book creation is a teamwork thing.
Yeah.
It shows that these three people are on the same page. Either you're on their page or they're on your page, kind of thing. So I would say just kind of relax and try to enjoy the moment. That's how I try to live my life. I try to enjoy the moment.
Sometimes that's all that we can do. There are days when you're just like, today just not it. Today
Hmm.
just didn't. I gave it my best effort, but it just didn't work. Or there are some days when you're like, man, it started out bad and it just wasn't there. Or some days it starts out bad and you're like, you know what? Towards the end, it got better because I got through the worst of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
seeing your work go through the process and then to be transformed into this incredible the pages of the coloring and lettering and everything, seeing your work to come to fruition, seeing something that was in your head
Mhm.
come to fruition is a beautiful thing. So those are family walks. I take often. I try to take walks in the morning if I can. During the fall is even better because it's got a little more of a chill in the air. I don't like walking in the heat, but I will just because exercise is important. I like to get out there, get that breath. But those fall walks when it's chilly are perfect, wonderful. I get my tea, my hot tea, boiling hot tea, make it in the morning. Those are great things. Something else I love to do is obviously read. So, what are the three comic books or graphic novels that you would recommend to someone?
Okay, so I thought about this. I was watching your show, and I was thinking, I was like, really, what is the question? Is recommend, not really favorite. And I would recommend
Or
there's
favorite or recommend? It's
yeah, but
because
there's a
they're your
difference.
choices.
There are books that I like, but I know I wouldn't recommend them because although I like them, no, but
Not every
I was thinking,
okay.
yeah, I was thinking about it, and I said, so for my first, I would say, there's a indie creator called, I can't remember his name now. He did a book called Holt. It's a, it's almost like a play on Metal Gear, that kind of 80s kind of stuff. And what I like about his book is you can tell he had fun creating it. I think
Mm-hmm.
his name is Cedric, and he had fun creating his. And it's spelled Holt is HOLT. Holt is a
Holt.
spy. Yeah, is a spy. I'll send you the link. It's a spy kind of. It's a very interesting book, and I just like it because it's an indie book that wasn't a superhero book, and I kind of had fun reading it. The
Mm-hmm.
other book would be Do a Power Bomb, and Do a Power Bomb. I kind of picked that one because I guarantee if you give that book to anyone, they will find it entertaining. Art, story, colors, pacing. You don't know where it's going to go, the emotions. And I was like, yes, this is a book. If I had to recommend someone, so I'm like, I want to get into comics. I don't know what to read. Should I read Superman #4? No. Read Do a Power Bomb. And then the last book I would recommend would be, and this was a bit of a hard one. I'm a big Mark Miller fan. Um, there's a book he just did called King of Spies, and
Yes.
I would recommend that. I like his work because I don't know if it's because his time in the industry, if he's done his dues, where he's at. His books have an air of he doesn't care. So whatever he wants to
Yeah.
put out on the page, he can put out on the page. So therefore, then you get a book that feels unrestrained. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of enjoyed it. I like a lot of his work. It's kind of like fluff, but I kind of like that. I kind of like that
Mm-hmm.
thing that sometimes I pick up a comic, I want entertainment more so than a wall of text trying to teach me something, or you know what I mean. I'm not saying that there's
Yeah.
something wrong with those books, but it's like, as you said, like after a hard day, it's what will help you unwind, kind of thing. So that's the other book, and that would be another one to kind of show anyone. Well, here's a way to do a story in 4 comics and wrap it up, that kind of thing. I think that's something that the indie creator industry needs to do. Be able to wrap up a story. You know what I mean? You go on something and someone says, "How many books is this?" And it says 16, and they're on book 2.
Yeah. So I haven't read Holt, so I got to check that out. Do a Power Bomb was my comic of the year for 2022 because I'm a professional wrestling fan.
Mm.
So I saw the story, and after it still stings. I still think about it now, and I read it when it first came out. It was an impulse buy. I was like, oh, let me just buy it. I bought it the day it came out. I read it, and I was like, oh wow, and I was instantly hooked. As a professional wrestling fan, and a comic book fan, I saw the comic layered because it was Mark Warren Johnson.
Yeah, it's
Mark
a
Johnson.
Warren Johnson.
Yeah, Warren.
Yeah.
He's
Daniel Warren Johnson.
Danny
Daniel,
Warren
he was
Johnson.
that. Mhm.
Danny Warren. Right. He's not just because he wrote and colored the and
He
wrote and
wrote,
drew.
he did everything. Yeah.
So he did all of that. He wrote a story. He actually booked matches, made the layout for the matches, then drew the matches. There's multiple layers of storytelling that he did. Anything I
Mhm.
enjoy, whether it's comics or professional wrestling, movies, what have you, I not only enjoy it, but I also kind of study it. So I'll listen to things about it and I'll watch it and I'll detail and I'll nuance it. It's almost like an OCD kind of a thing, but it's because I want to be able to analyze it and I want to be able to review it properly. There's no bias in me. So reading this, I got feels of all the companies of WWE, of AEW, of New Japan Pro Wrestling, different companies and promotions. I read it as a fan of comics, as a reviewer, as a fan of professional wrestling. That was such a perfect book, and the ending was unbelievably tear jerking. At the time, I was going through something with my mother and her health, and it hit me. And I read the first issue, excuse me, the last issue, and I teared up. I literally teared up because I was like, damn. And this is from a comic that starts out as a wrestling comic and it becomes this life comic and about, and also about parents and their children. There's so much more to that book. It's encompassing of so much that's why it was easily my book of 2022. It was 2022 when it came out, correct? 2022 or 2020? No, 2020 when it came out. It's so hard nowadays. I want to say 2022.
Yeah, COVID is, yeah.
Yeah. That COVID changed time for us forever. But that was the minute you said "do," I knew you were going to say a power bomb, and I was like, "I got me," because that was such a. I'll need to go read it. Mark Millar. I have a love-hate relationship with Mark Millar. Um, yeah, I'll just say that. But his newest comic, Nightclub, is really
Mm.
good because I'm a fan of vampires, and he also did the price point of the books are $1.99. Nobody's books are $1.99 right now, and I found that very interesting. I do like his the Magic Order. I read the first issue and I liked it. I want to get more. I've read what were the other one that he had, which became a movie, not Kick Ass, but the other one. I can't remember the name of it. With the assassins.
Oh,
Um,
Kingsman.
no, no,
Kingsman.
no, 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 not that one. The group of assassins that are in the comic, they're villains.
Wanted.
Yes, the one. Yeah, I read that one twice. I also read, oh my god, Nemesis when it came out.
Yeah.
Like Millar for the fact that he does not care, but I also at times feel like I wish he did care,
Mm.
if that makes sense. Because sometimes he'll throw like a lot of pop culture stuff in there too. So yeah, so I have a love hate relationship with him.
I can
So yeah,
understand that.
yeah,
I don't read everything because I will read things that speak to me. So
yes,
like some books he's done never thing, but big James Bond fan. So King of Spies was like right there for me.
hmm
The Ambassadors, I want to see that.
that looks
I was
interesting.
yeah I was put onto him when he did Kick Ass, and I liked Kick
Okay.
Ass, the comic book. That
hmm
so and then Hit Girl and that kind of stuff. So
I didn't read or watch Kick Ass. I don't. It just didn't. I think it was. This is probably going to be sacrilege. I think it was the art on the book uh uh
John
Ramita.
Romita Jr. Yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
people.
sometimes he's yeah, sometimes it's just not for me. And again, I can't draw. So but I give anyone who can draw credit. When people give them trouble, I go, look, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's cool. Don't need to like when people
Yeah,
say stuff about Liefeld. it- I put my hands up. Look, the guy came up with, all some of the greatest books out there that we loved and characters that still live on. So I can't say anything. And I'm not going to because I'll give the guy. You can say whatever you want. He can't draw feet, whatever that Captain America with the ridiculous torso. Yeah, but the guy's been in the business for how long? So
yeah.
I go, he's not my cup of tea. So, but those are some great picks. So folks, go check those comics out, but only after you go and pledge to Task Force COPD. What? Why did I say
COT.
COPD as if it said no. This is not. Oh my God. See, now you got me with it now. So critical ops
Critical
task
ops.
force and the wounded too, which I want to see the continuation of that story because seeing that I want to build like that was what gave me hope too. That just is awesome. But folks, we've come to the like one of those questions, the most important question that I can ask someone, I think, because it's right in the title. I say this every show. This hasn't changed in season 4. It hasn't changed. Food. Obviously, we have to hit on food. We've talked about comics. We've talked about incredible products. We've talked about mental health, which is also so very important to me. But just like you need to take care of your mind, you need to take care of your body too. You got to eat. So, Nigel, what's a restaurant that you can recommend to us? And what's your favorite dish there?
Okay, so for me, I'm a big fan of chicken, barbecue chicken, rotisserie chicken. And there's a place off Bridgetown, which is the capital of Barbados, in Eagle Hall. And it's called Maps Bar and Rotisserie. And it has some of the best rotisserie chicken in the island. They have a sauce it's a very unique sauce. It kind of has like almost like a vinaigrette kind of taste to it. That kind of gives you chicken that sweet and tangy taste. So that's what I'm. Yeah, so that's why. And the menu is very simple. It's either chicken and chips, or just chicken and. I'm not even sure. I only go for chicken and chips.
Okay. I'm very simple. Even though I do enjoy food, obviously, I enjoy food a great deal. I mean, I love. Damn, this plate is making. This plate is getting me angry. Jeez. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of simple things though with food. So when I get to see, just something like chicken and chips is very easy for me. Fish and chips even too. I love that. So, and I'm always a fan of different sauces and tangy styles and everything, especially when you can do it because chicken is such a versatile food of a meat that you can do so much with it. So to see different sauces, and if I can get something that hits me, and if it's something that that's good enough where I can dip my chips in there, I'm all in. I'm all in. So yeah, definitely this is yeah, man. I really get mad at y'all for what y'all recommend for food because I'm sitting here and I'm not at the restaurant that y'all are talking about. But it gives me a list of places to go, for my bucket list. So I'm not mad at it. So yes, this is Mop Bar and Rotisserie. Look, rotisserie is right in the name. I mean, that alone is got to tell you that the chicken is going to be good. Damn, it's just all right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about this. I'm gonna have to make a trip one day. Bet. So, Nigel, thank you so very much.
No, thank you.
This was a pleasure, honestly. This was something that was in the making, and I'm glad you decided to come back into the fold of the comic book industry and to keep going. I'm so thankful that your friend talked to you and just gave those words that you needed. And the fact that we have, that we have Critical Ops Task Force, as well as Wounded 2 as a double feature for the Kickstarter. I absolutely love. Amazing art. Like I said, if you were saying, if you like Extraction, if you like the Raid Redemption, this is gonna hit so right, and it's gonna be right up your alley. Okay, folks. So go check them out. While you're at it, go check out also the Beyond Publishing Caribbean. I mean, this is another. Just look, 17 years in the game. That shows right there. You have any final words for the folks, Nigel?
I just want to shout out also to Wiseacre Comics.
Yes.
They're the ones who I'm kind of signed with them, and it's through them that I'm able to do this Kickstarter. And as you said, they brought out some excellent books also.
Yes.
So I just want to say thank you to them for helping me along, because in this indie space, we don't get anywhere without help from each other.
Yeah, it's a lot of support and a lot of like word of mouth even too. Yeah, I might need to hit up a Wiseacre about coming on as well, because I like I said, Magnus was just a breath of fresh. I really needed Magnus at that time, so it's wonderful to have, just like yeah, when you hit me up, and yeah, I needed the Wounded at that time, and then it was the palate cleansing from Critical Ops Task Force was like, damn, got me with the double header. Okay, cool. So I definitely was on point with that, and it's an incredible comic. I truly loved what they did, and I was all in for those comics. So definitely, you definitely recommend them. So folks, that's the show. As always, look, go hit the link. As always, I'll have the link in the episode description, so you can go and check it out and go pledge, see what's going on. I'll also have the link for Beyond Caribbean Publishing. Will be in the link. Excuse me, will be in the episode description as well. It's a win-win situation, folks. Look, you have a good day. Enjoy the rest of it. As always, do the best you can with what you got, because in the end, that's all that you get. And like the man said, be like water. All right, y'all have a great time. Enjoy the day. I will see you next Friday. Remember, every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will get the Hungry Bleak show. And next time, I'll be back with, I don't know, but we're going to have some fun. All right. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy the rest of it. Thank you and be safe. See you later. Peace.
Bye-bye.